Good morning. Yes, Mr Swinney, I am being festive today. General questions. Question number 1, Rhoda Grant.
To ask the Scottish Government when it will announce its plans for the Highlands and Islands superfast broadband pilot.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
Presiding Officer, I don't think I can match the chivalry of my colleagues, so I'll stay on topic. The Scottish Government's Step Change 2015 programme, which will deliver access to next-generation broadband for 85 to 90% of premises across Scotland, is being delivered through 2 procurement exercises, one covering the Highlands and Islands and the other covering the rest of Scotland. Highlands and Islands Enterprise are leading the procurement for the Highlands and Islands project and expect to award the contract early in the new year.
Rhoda Grant.
The Highlands and Islands lag far behind the rest of Scotland with broadband provision currently, with the Western Isles being identified as having the worst broadband service in Scotland. I'm sure the Minister is aware that there's a great deal of anticipation regarding the delivery of the improvement of the Highlands and Islands project. Can she advise me what percentage of coverage it expects to be achieved in the Western Isles in particular and throughout the Highlands and Islands in general?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, she's absolutely right to talk in particular about the Western Isles, because the Western Isles is a key focus of discussion as we move towards the award of the contract. I don't think anybody living in the Western Isles, and I absolutely agree with her that it's a particularly challenging area, but nevertheless we need to meet the aspirations of people living in Western Isles. But it won't come as a surprise to her that as things stand at the moment, the percentage that can be covered is lower than in other areas because of the distance of many people in the Western Isles from the exchange. Many communities are more than 40 kilometres from their nearest exchange. But there is a very strong commitment from the Scottish Government, from HIE and from COSLA and Western Isles Local Authority to ensure that we do find the solutions to make sure that the Western Isles get a fair deal from this. And I discussed this very issue with COSLA representatives just a few weeks ago, and there is that shared commitment, and I'd be very happy, as I'm sure Highlands and Islands Enterprise would be, to keep the member posted on our progress in that regard.
Question number 2, David Torrance.
To ask the Scottish Government how it guarantees fair access to a grid and the right to choose independent connection providers for built and planned renewable installations.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, the regulatory framework within which the grid operates is tightly controlled by Ofgem and underpinned by United Kingdom Government legislation. Applications to access and transmit the electricity distribution and transition network are made to the relevant distribution network operator. All connection infrastructure works have to be carried out by the transmission system owner or system operator. There is no option for an independent connection provider.
David Torrance.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his answer. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that competition within the grid and energy supply, as well as in building and connecting the corresponding infrastructures, is essential to achieve our energy targets, guaranteed grid security and enable energy exports to the European market?
Cabinet Secretary.
I think the significance of grid infrastructure cannot be overstated, and Mr Torrance is absolutely correct to raise this issue because it's fundamental to the achievement of our renewable electricity targets, which is, as Parliament has considered in terms of information provided by the Government, we are well on course to achieving. The Government welcomes the broad direction of travel for European energy policy towards greater openness of grid access, greater diversity of energy suppliers and increased interconnections of markets, and that should assist us in this way. I should also inform Mr Torrance that the Government has set up the Community Energy Grid Networks Working Group in partnership with the distribution network operators and Community Energy Scotland to identify and fund projects that can provide maximum use and value from the existing network around communities interested in generating their own renewable energy.
Question number 3, Nigel Donn.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it ensures that Disclosure Scotland covers all relevant aspects of society.
Minister Aileen Campbell.
Disclosure Scotland offers a range of different checks, which include the basic disclosure under the Police Act 1997. An individual can apply for a basic disclosure for any purpose. Standard and enhanced disclosures are also available under the 1997 Act for certain prescribed positions. In addition, Disclosure Scotland provides the Protecting Vulnerable Groups scheme, a membership scheme for individuals doing regulated work with children or protected adults.
Nigel Donn.
Thank the Minister for the answer to that question. Where a convicted criminal is released on licence with restrictions as to who he may associate with, in particular vulnerable young adults, what discretion does the local police have in alerting relevant organisations to the risk he may pose, please?
Thank you.
Minister.
Thank Nigel Dawn for raising that important issue. The decision on whether third-party disclosures should take place lies with the Chief Constable. Where there is information relevant to a particular individual and situation, then disclosure may be made after consultation between the police and other responsible agencies for the management of the offender. The multi-agency public protection arrangements provide a focus at case management level for agencies to actively take community notification into consideration. It is important to note that any decision to disclose further information is made very carefully on a case-by-case basis, taking into account a range of different factors, and those include the nature and pattern of previous offending, compliance with previous sentences or court orders, any predatory behaviour which may indicate a likelihood of re-offending, the probability that a further offence will be committed, and that such harm and behaviour would be caused. And I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to meet with Nigel Dawn if necessary for any other information he may seek.
Number 4, Elaine Murray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My apologies, Presiding Officer. This question was submitted prior to the announcement of yesterday's statement. To ask the Scottish Government what proportion of the Barnett consequentials arising from the autumn statement it will allocate to affordable housing.
Minister Margaret Burgess.
Thank you. The Finance Secretary advised Parliament yesterday that an additional £50 million will be allocated to housing in 2013-14 from the consequentials flowing to the Scottish Government as part of the UK Autumn Statement. One of our highest priorities is taking action in housing in Scotland, which is why this Government is implementing a range of measures which not only increase the supply of affordable and social rented homes, but also support our construction sector, helping to create jobs and stimulate economic growth. I will confirm shortly how we will allocate this additional funding for the coming year.
Elaine Murray.
I thank the Minister for her reply. However, the affordable supply budget, including yesterday's announcement, will still be £78.4 million less than the outturn expenditure figure for 2011-12. In that year, rented housing statistics fell to 3,025, a reduction of over 50% compared to the previous year. Therefore, will the Minister lobby the Cabinet Secretary for Finance for a further increase for the funding available specifically for housing for social rent?
Minister.
Thank the member for that. This Scottish Government is building as many houses now than were currently be built under the previous administrations, but with less money. We are committed to the social rented sector and to affordable housing supply in Scotland, and we will continue in our progress of. We're already committed to 30,000 new houses, and will shortly intimate how many more we'll build with the additional funding.
Question number 5, Patricia Ferguson.
To ask the Scottish Government what the most recent discussions are that it has had with the UK Government to discuss the future of Remploy in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary John Swinney.
Presiding Officer, my colleague Fergus Ewing spoke with Esther McVeigh, the Minister for Disabled People, on 6th of December, shortly before the announcement to commence Stage 2 of the commercial process. Scottish Government officials met Remploy and DWP officials to discuss greater involvement and collaboration with Stage 2 on Monday the 17th of December.
Patricia Ferguson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer, and as the Cabinet Secretary may be aware, workers at the Remploy factory in Springburn in my constituency are facing the closure of their factory at the end of January. Unfortunately, however, DWP and Remploy will not have allocated them their caseworkers until the 7th of January, which to me is exactly the kind of help that workers need at this vital time for them. But I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary could also advise me whether there have been any discussions between the Scottish Government and the DWP concerning the possibility of the NHS in Scotland taking over responsibility for the Springburn Remploy factory, where wheelchairs for the NHS are the only product.
Cabinet Secretary.
First of all, can I say to Patricia Ferguson that I think her observation about the timetable for the availability of caseworkers for affected employees her concerns are absolutely justifiable, and I think it's illustrative of the unacceptability of the manner in which this whole process has been conducted. And this is, of course, not the first time that members, and particularly Patricia Ferguson, have had reasonable ground to raise these concerns about the way in which this whole issue has been handled by the DWP and by Remploy. Now, in relation to the steps that the Scottish Government has taken, we obviously had a debate in Parliament a couple of weeks ago on this question, a very helpful debate which I think has demonstrated the areas of clear agreed focus within Parliament that we need to take forward. And the issue and opportunity that Patricia Ferguson raises about a role for the National Health Service is one that I will certainly ensure is positively explored to determine if there is any way that we can take forward any further work on that question. A number of commitments were given in the debate about the establishment of an employer recruitment incentive in relation to individuals who may lose their jobs as a consequence of the changes, and I can confirm to Parliament that that work is receiving urgent attention to take forward as early as we possibly can do.
Number 6, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with Aberdeen City Council regarding the proposed third Don crossing.
Cabinet Secretary Nicholas Sturgeon.
The only discussion that has taken place recently is between officials from Transport Scotland and Aberdeen City Council about the possibility of including the third Don crossing in the NPD contract to construct the AWPR and Balmedy-Tipperty.
Kevin Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her answer. The Cabinet Secretary will be aware that Aberdeen City Council agreed yesterday to progress with the third Don crossing, which is very welcome news indeed. Will the Cabinet Secretary consider bundling the third Don crossing contract with the AWPR contract if Aberdeen City Council requests this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I can say to Kevin Stewart that we will consider that, although I should also say that a final decision is expected to be taken prior to the issuing of the tender documents for the main NPD contract, which is programmed for spring 2013. But I can assure Kevin Stewart that consideration will be given to any such request by Aberdeen City Council.
Lewis MacDonald.
Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that Tillydrone Community Council also met yesterday, indeed in Mr Stewart's constituency, and far from welcoming this matter, they wanted to discuss with their local councillors what the impact of this project would be? Will ministers address the concerns of local people about the division of their community by a new road and about the impact on regeneration the next time ministers discuss this project with Aberdeen City Council?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, not only will ministers be very mindful of local opinion, I would expect Aberdeen City Council, as I would expect any council, to take account of those views. These are considerations that first and foremost are considerations for local communities, balancing the needs of the economy and regeneration with the interests of individual communities, and all of that I would expect to be taken into account when final decisions, or before final decisions, are taken.
Number 7, John Finney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what benefits specialist domestic abuse courts bring to victims.
Cabinet Secretary Kenny McCaskill.
Domestic abuse is completely unacceptable and has no place in a modern Scotland. We know that helping victims through this traumatic time requires support from the point they make contact with the police, criminal justice, social work or the third sector. This network of support is available throughout the country. Additional advocacy support is provided in Glasgow, where unfortunately there is a high density of cases. Where domestic abuse cases are brought before a specialist court, they will be heard before a dedicated sheriff. Prosecutors across the country have extensive guidance available to them to assist in dealing effectively with domestic abuse cases.
John Finney.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply. With over 500 charges with domestic abuse aggravation reported to the Fiscal from Inverness alone, and over 1,000 over the Highland Council area, would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the Highlands victims would benefit from a specialist domestic abuse court, and could he encourage officials to examine the possibility of putting one in place, please?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, we certainly recognise that domestic abuse scars far too many communities, and probably every community in Scotland. I think statistically, Highlands and Islands or Northern Constabulary areas is second lowest, but there's still far too much. Each area operates a different approach depending upon the number of domestic abuse cases it deals with. In the Highlands of Islands, the density of cases is lower, although the number clearly mentioned is far too high. Local partners have decided that, given the case volumes and the court capacity in the Highlands and Islands, these cases can be supported just as effectively in the mainstream, summary and solemn courts. Obviously, this matter is kept under constant review by all the appropriate partners, whether it's the Constabulary, whether it's the Court Service, whether it's the Crown and Procurator Fiscal Service, or those acting in other agencies and capacities. So clearly I'll happily reflect upon that, discuss with matters, But clearly it would appear that one of the most significant progress we can probably make is perhaps to follow the recommendation of Lord Carloway in terms of the abolition of corroboration that will help to address matters not simply rape but indeed domestic abuse.
Mary Scanlon.
Can I ask if some of the £10 million announced yesterday for justice be allocated to upgrade courts in the Highlands and help develop a specialist domestic abuse court for males and females to ensure equity of access for justice, but also because people in this area face the longest travelling distances?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, I think we are aware of the difficulties caused by remoteness in the north. It would be fair to say that although we recognise that it is not gender-specific, it's still the case that, sadly, and indeed quite frankly, although there is domestic abuse by females upon males, it's dwarfed significantly by those perpetrated by males upon females. But both aspects are addressed. Again, these matters are for the court service, but I can give Mary Scanlon the same assurance that I gave to John Finney, that these matters are viewed with the utmost seriousness by all the agencies acting there. And the factor that Mary Scanlon mentions in terms of the remoteness, the difficulties of travel, also have to be borne in mind in terms of what we can do in the appropriate courts. We do things differently in Glasgow than we do in other areas, such as Edinburgh, but equally each area has specialist support, each area has specialist advice, and each area is getting additional support from this government to tackle what is fundamentally unacceptable and wrong and needs to be addressed in modern Scotland.
Question number 8, Rod Campbell.
To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it's had with the Secretary of State for Defence regarding the establishment of a multi-role brigade at RAF Lucas, given the importance of these proposals to the local community.
Cabinet Secretary Nicola Sturgeon.
The Scottish Government has persistently pressed the UK Government to deliver on the commitments it has made to defence communities around Scotland, including at Lookers. Most recently, I wrote to the Secretary of State for Defence on the 12th of December, following the news that a basing announcement would not take place by the end of this year as promised. I was again very clear that Scotland has much to offer the military and their families, but that our communities have been more than patient and deserve clarity now. We will also continue to press for the commitments made to Scotland more widely to be delivered.
Lord Campbell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that, notwithstanding the considerable underspend in defence spending in Scotland over recent years, it now seems that the 6,500 to 7,000 army troops promised by the then Secretary of State Liam Fox in July 2011 looks like a considerable overstatement? Moreover, does she accept and understand that the delay in making an announcement is causing considerable concern in the local community?
Cabinet Secretary.
Rod Campbell is absolutely right to point to the concern and the uncertainty that the delay in the basing announcement is resulting in the communities he represents. He's also right to highlight the disproportionate reductions we've seen in the military in Scotland following the decisions of successive UK governments, which since 2000 have been 35% in Scotland compared to 20% across the UK as a whole. In the letter I wrote to the Secretary of State for Defence, I pointed out that in just the last year, Scotland saw a further reduction of 7.5% in the number of service personnel based here, the greatest proportionate fall in any of the UK nations. And against that background, Rod Campbell can be assured that we will continue to take every opportunity to urge the UK Government to halt that decline as quickly as possible and fulfil the clear commitments that Liam Fox made in July 2011.
Number 9, Jean Urquhart.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what recent representations it's made to BBC Scotland regarding job losses in its Highlands and Islands service.
Mr Hamza Yousaf.
It is vital that BBC Scotland maintains the highest standards of broadcasting, services of radio, television and online across the whole of Scotland. With a licence fee freeze imposed by the UK Government, the Scottish Government maintains grave concerns over the impact of job losses at BBC Scotland, including in the Highlands and Islands. The First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Culture and External Affairs have repeatedly expressed their concerns to the Director of BBC Scotland, the Chair of the BBC Trust and respective Directors Generals of the BBC. The Cabinet Secretary most recently met with the BBC Scotland Director Ken Macquarie on the 8th of November 2012 to discuss the impact of job losses, and has also written to the incoming new BBC Director General Tony Hall, highlighting again the Government's concerns.
Briefly, Ms Harker.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for his reply. But do you agree with me, as I agree with the ambition that you've clearly stated, But do you agree that deleting the senior reporter post in BBC Radio Highland does not allow for a truly nationwide service, such as we described?
Minister, briefly.
I would do show the concerns of the Minister, of the member, and absolutely we're happy to continue to make these concerns known to the BBC, to BBC Scotland directors, and also to the BBC team in the UK as a whole, but we absolutely share the member's concerns in that regard.
We now move to First Minister.